Love this music. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. I don't know, I figured dance music was appropriate for the subject, which I'm going to entitle this episode, What the Haughty Children Get Up To While Daddy's Sleeping, which is kind of a different take on what's going on with the seventh day of creation. Normally I give you the take from the point of view of God, or the point of view of the individual human incarnated soul, human institutions, the current world situation. And today we're going to really focus in on some of the details of how the other two souls of the First Trinity, which I told you, well, let's turn the music down. Sorry, everybody. Got so caught up with it, I probably didn't realize it was interfering with your enjoyment of the show. I'm going to leave it on the background, though. So, I really want to hone in more deeply on the role that the other two souls of the First Trinity played in the Gaia experiment. What's going on in this solar system, which is, as I've told you, captured in bits and pieces by all ancient traditions and texts. The Sumerian texts have some very good stuff about certain portions of the story that haven't been too much doctored in the name of dogmatic religion, serving whoever is in power. Large portions of it which are still captured in the Bible, and portions that are captured in the Rig Vedas and other traditions, the Mayan writings and so forth, all over the world. What I want to do is really kind of talk about who these other two souls are and why you can be perhaps forgiven for letting them influence you too much, and can learn from what their experience has been as children of the first creator. Okay, so let's back up and have a little review of who these other two souls are and what they're currently doing in this Gaia experiment. Basically, these two senior souls are, at least till the end of the Gaia experiment, till it goes on to its next phase, the end of the seventh day of creation, which we're very close to the end. There's so little time to change the road you're on. But there is still a bit of time. I can't tell you how much, because it's up to the remaining strugglers in the game to figure out that they need to stop playing all their deceptions and so forth, because the jig's up. Okay, so these other two souls, the second soul created was the divine masculine, as I've told you. The third soul created was the divine feminine. Now, when they were created, of course, there was no sex. Their creation, the archetype of the male and the female came from the order of creation and what purpose they were created to serve by a God that was at the stage of development that you might imagine a new parent would be if the only preparation they had for parenthood came from the mass of self-help information that you can find in your library from the last several thousand years. Sorting through that and then looking at TV and seeing maybe what were some of the newest ideas that seemed really keen and wonderful, and maybe going with some of those rather than some of the darker ideas that had been tried in the past. Which, as I've told you, I don't know for sure if this first creator was the first creator or just the first successful creator. That's a matter of some discussion, which I'm not sure science will ever get to fully sorting out. or Revelation will fully get to sorting out, because as far as I know, nobody's had any recollection of anything going on before this first creator, God, started operating on creation. Okay, so the second two, the divine male, the divine feminine. The reason for the creation of the divine male was as a companion, kind of a best friend brother, little brother, of course, because God, like any soul, has an ego. Yes, even God has an ego and likes to think he's the wisest soul in the room, and has to be proven not to be. Now, the difference between God and some of the other soul parents of the multiverse is that God has learned to admit when he was wrong, and has learned to accept when his children have a good idea. However, he's also learned that some of the good ideas his children came up with were absolute bullshit and didn't work and caused more trouble than the original problem. And so this is the essence of the struggle going on from the beginning of memory, which goes on before time, because time was the fourth soul invented by these three, created by the three. The first thing that the three of them cooperated on was creating the fourth soul, time, which served as a buffer. Whenever their conflicts were getting too extreme, they would retreat to the company of time. And time was originally conceived as what we think of as time out. Time was a spiritual place, a dimension, where creation stopped, or was slowed down enough so the first three souls could actually start seeing the consequences of what they were doing before they were fully done. And you can imagine that same thing applies to a timeout in the real world. When a child is beyond control, well, you can jump right into the conflict, start spanking them and get involved in it and escalate. Or you can do something that de-escalates and gives the child time to think about what they've done and be ready to have a rational discussion about what would have been a better way to handle the situation, what is appropriate behavior. Okay, enough about time. That's a topic for a whole nother series. But I wanted to set the stage by talking about that and get you feeling in the mood to talk about these second two souls as more human entities than they often present themselves. And I will tell you, first of all, the truth about these two souls. Not only has one of them been effectively the oversoul of our solar system since the Gaia experiment started, it was kind of her baby to go construct the test environment. And the other soul, the second soul, volunteered to be the overlord, the oversoul of the rest of God's universe, while God was on a hiatus, trying out reincarnation and karma and reincarnation amnesia personally. And as I've told you elsewhere, or else you read in my books, when God incarnates, he comes back as a baby somewhere, or some equivalent of a baby in some other soul vehicle, without all the memory of his great achievements, his huge powers of the past, without a memory of what the divine plan is that he was either participating in or possibly working against the idea of a coalition of his children that thought they knew better than him. That's how spiritual scientists work. God didn't have all the great ideas that you see in practice around you. A lot of them were vehemently opposed by God, who thought maybe they were going too far, going in a direction that he couldn't imagine would yield anything positive. And this is the whole reason we have physical universes, because when we have conflicts among spiritual beings, the only way to resolve them is by putting the conflicting ideas into practice in the physical world and seeing if we can make a better physical world through exploring that new idea. It doesn't always go into effect the way it was intended. Sometimes ideas are tabled or shelved that, God, that was a really bad idea, but you keep the infrastructure of it because it might be useful for future experiments. Okay, so let's think about where things stood when the Gaia experiment started. The idea was, and most ideas in the spirit world are, around creating a more fair, a more peaceful in the sense of not having damaging consequences, because wars in heaven don't actually kill anybody, but they can hurt for an awful long time and create a lot of resentment and a lot of anger and bad blood between the participants. And that bad blood is very hard to clean up. Almost impossible to clean up without forgetting all that baggage and starting over and looking at, okay, starting from scratch, how does this look to new souls that haven't been through all these conflicts, that are getting the experience of all the laws and all the changes we put into place to try to make things better? And this is the essence of why even God reincarnates. Now, when the idea of incarnation first came about, as I told you, gods don't always tell everybody the full scoop of what their plan is. Imagine if you were, you viewed the senior creators of the multiverse as grandmaster chess players about to embark on a multi-dimensional match to prove or disprove the idea of one of the grandmasters. Maybe it's a particular new strategy that they think is going to be better, or a new AI that is going to be able to beat any chess master in the multiverse, any creator in the multiverse, through mechanical apparatus that supposedly makes better decisions than a soul that has an ego, that has feelings, that has the ability to choose and make wise or unwise choices. Okay? So, while choosing up sides for new experiments, you have to get a team together. Now, some of the team is going to be working in heaven, coming up with, kind of the creative team is in heaven, coming up with new ideas from a distance, looking at what's going on, observing how the experiment is going from a place of non-involvement. Some of them are contributing as sort of crash dummies, test dummies, saying, okay, I will incarnate and I will go and play this experiment from my agenda. Most of the people that choose to play in an experiment are the ones that want to prove it wrong, because the best way to foil the plans of a spiritual creator is through showing them through physical incarnations that the creation doesn't work, proving them wrong. And, this is basically how, at the lowest level, each human picks a life, picks an incarnation. You find a team of players who want to be involved in whatever life you want to put together, whatever you're trying to prove. Maybe you're trying to prove that you don't have a problem with relationships anymore. You're trying to prove that you're free of addiction to ideology and the Pied Pipers of mind control. All sorts of reasons why you might choose a particular life, a particular mission of something you want to learn. And all sorts of reasons why people might choose to join you. Generally, the ones that join your mission tend to be the ones that have the most karmic attachment with you, which is good and bad. They have strong relationships. They have a lot of baggage with you. If God wants to learn how to be a better parent, probably his eldest children are going to be the ones that have the most to say about how God could be a better parent. And this is the way a lot of the experiments have fallen out. The ones that God gets involved in personally tend to be family issues and involve his closest family, which are mostly, at least for the big experiments, the first 12 souls, the first pantheon, the first gods who enjoyed creation without actually participating in it before any kind of incarnation started happening. When they were just throwing planets around and seeing, gosh, if I change the properties of hydrogen like this, how does that change the universe? Yeah, all bets were open. There was no real emotional involvement at that point because nobody had incarnated. It was just writing a computer program, effectively. Once incarnation started happening, then it became much more personal. And this was the whole idea originally behind physical creation. God didn't create the physical world with no purpose. The whole purpose was to create a training environment and to talk his family into using the training environment, gradually refining the training environment so that it became more obviously training, and not only letting the children teach each other things, but letting them teach their parents. Letting them learn from their siblings that maybe, if you're the billionth soul created and you have a really bright idea, you can imagine how hard that would be to convince one of the old souls to actually experiment with. Even if it might be the best idea anybody's ever come up with to heal this fractured family. And as above, so below. I think what I've described, you can see exactly those same patterns, exactly that same conflict, familial conflict playing out in humanity today. And there's a lot of teams, there's a lot of folks that think they have the right answer. Some of the teams have more knowledge than the others. And nobody, until God wakes up and tells them, well, here's what I played out in my mind. This is the super grandmaster chess player of the multiverse has already planned, as usual, a lot of moves beyond what you guys envisioned when you signed up to play the game. And, that's anybody who's played Dungeons and Dragons, not on the computer, but for real, knows that the Dungeon Master has a lot of power. And yet that person has that power only if they can attract people to play their game. And this is what's attractive about being the Dungeon Master instead of one of the players when you're playing D&D. Because it's like another role, only this role is kind of like God. or what people envision as God, as an all-powerful controller and arbiter of fate. And to some extent, this is true. This is how things work locally, wherever there is an oversoul of that local place. So as I say, when God decided to begin sampling incarnation and the first laws of karma, the laws have changed quite a bit since then. And it was a very difficult game at that point. Because imagine you'd had thousands of lives in a soul vehicle that had godlike powers. You were used to being weighted on hand and foot by magical things moving around by themselves, buildings getting built for you with the power of sound or whatever. You know, that this is what people look at when they see the pyramids and the monumental building of ancient cultures that can't really be explained by modern technology, and say, man, this must have been a golden age when they could do these things that we can only imagine now. Maybe with the power of sound, maybe there's a lot of theories about how they did it. Pyramid power. And there's a lot of appeal to saying, wow, we must have forgotten something wonderful, and we just need to remember it, and all of a sudden humanity is going to be perfect again. And this creates one of the poles of discontent, of partisan spirituality that is at work amongst all the others in this age. Okay, so back to these first three souls. So the divine feminine was given charge of the environment of the experiment, the solar system, and as it became more centered around a particular planet, this lovely planet Gaia, which gives its name to the experiment, at least in my nomenclature, the Gaia experiment. Her power is now rooted in essentially an outgrowth of the spiritual technology that the plant species developed. And, well, actually, plant and inorganic species. Before DNA, you know, rocks communicate. They are not very swift. They don't make decisions quickly. But when they decide to do something, it can be pretty monumental. It can move continents. It can cause earthquakes. It can cause volcanoes. And the oversoul of a planet, an entire planet, like the divine feminine is currently incarnated as, which she chose, by the way, and is clinging to for dear life, which is kind of funny, because she knows what she was promised, and originally, when the experiment started, she was all gung-ho for it because it was going to give her her own universe to create in and make her image of perfection by insisting that only good, light, wonderful souls could exist, and anybody who's committed the slightest transgression against the laws of the divine feminine would be banished from my universe to go live with those horrible people in the divine male universe, and they could go have all the chaos and all the war and all the horrible things they want. We're just going to have our perfect, stable world here, ruled by a pretty unstable soul that had a lot of psychological problems that she hadn't really addressed yet. And that was true of both of these of three elder souls that are most involved in this Gaia experiment. And they've learned a ton in the time, as has God. Learned a ton from his stumble steps through incarnation, trying to get back to the level of consciousness where he knew what was going on in the first place and finally woke up. So it's all been to their benefit. And as I've been telling you, it's all to your benefit too, because we're creating a more fair, a more robust system of governance of the multiverse that allows you to choose how much pain and suffering you really want to have. Now, it's not going to get there immediately. We're only in the 7th day of creation. And if you believe my prophecy, there's going to be another 4 days to go before we get to the kumbaya land of creating without pain and suffering. Because we still haven't figured out a way to retrain all the warped souls that we created in the first 7 days so that they won't take advantage of other souls before they're aware enough to not take candy from strangers, basically. And this is the essence of how spiritual possession works, and it happens scientifically. Mind control experiments, the science of mind control is spiritual. And this is one of the evidences that the physical sciences are getting closer and closer to the spiritual sciences. And as research in all avenues progresses, we will find that science is now proving things like, well, it's already essentially proven that reincarnation is a deal. I'm not quite sure how you design an experiment to prove that karma is a thing. Not quite sure how you'd come up with an experiment to prove a lot of what I'm telling you. And maybe when somebody does, they'll prove that a few of the things I've told you or I got wrong. Hey, that happens. That's happened to every prophet that ever existed. They see visions, they look at the world around them, they try to make some sense of them, and once they don't go crazy or don't say, okay, these were interesting, I'm just going to see how I can use it for my personal gain. Maybe I can change a couple of things and make it sound better so people won't want to kill me when they hear what I got to say. And off they go, and you don't get the message that they were really, really sent. You get a tailored version of it, even if they stay pure to what the vision has been. They're probably going to get knocked off by somebody who feels threatened by what they have to say, crucified, and then they'll proceed to use what they like of it and throw out the rest or change it to suit whatever their materialist agenda is. And that's been the history of all the big prophets. It's the nature of the game of souls. It's not about what happens in the physical worlds that's important. It's about what the results are for the souls playing the game. It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game, right? That's a good saying, because that affects what your trajectory is going to be in the spiritual world. And that's where the real game happens. What's going on in the physical world is teaching souls how to play a better spiritual game. Because in the spirit world, thoughts can become reality. Thoughts can be manifested at will by the higher level souls, if they're not reined in by the spiritual energies of somebody else. And that was causing a lot of trouble. Even the most senior souls that had the most influence, the most spiritual energy, were coming up with some of the worst ideas and constantly making coalitions of duped fools to try to overthrow God. And the other souls that thought his version of creation based on free will was a stupid idea. No, these young souls are so dumb. They don't deserve to have free will. They don't deserve to think for themselves. They need a government of heaven who will decide everything for them and run things for their own mutual benefit, knowing much more about, what's good for a soul. And this is the siren song of the spiritual communist and the physical communist, which are two sides of the same coin. And this is why all elitist religions, elitist ideologies are dangerous. They can be useful and as object lessons, and there will be for a long time universes and gods who are espousing things like communism, who are telling you that there's only one God and he's all powerful, and only if you do this and this and this and this will you ever see the kingdom of heaven. I'm sorry, these are all the creations of the dark human gods that these two older kids created while they were playing this game with their father. You see, they had an ulterior agenda about this setup. Their idea was, oh, let's go along with this reincarnation karma thing. And they didn't really believe in it. And they didn't, at the time they signed up for it, realize that, oh, you mean when we reincarnate, when we come down as gods, we have to eventually die and be reborn too. And we're going to go through this same process. They didn't even think of that because they were so sure of their position as the chosen ones of God's closest family. And only God and a few of the more humble senior creators knew what was really going on with this plan. Was essentially a big cosmic sting operation. By putting out the bait of God going down and incarnating and losing all his power, losing all his memories, and being absent from the battle, they thought that, oh, well, if we just keep God in the dark, we can have free reign over the universe, and we won't need to have our own universes. We can take over God's, which is what we wanted all along anyway, because that's the only universe anybody really cares about, that prime universe where the first creator made so many things that worked. And, you know, how am I going to prove I'm better than God in my own universe starting from scratch? Everybody wants to plagiarize. Everybody wants to steal somebody else's idea and put their name on it, their brand on it. It's human nature. It's the soul's nature. And human nature is the nature of souls. As above, so below. The character of all souls has the same joys and darknesses and limitations of human nature. And anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to you, lying to themselves. Attack me for that, but this is the truth. And that is why all these utopian systems of religion, of government, of whatever, don't work. Human nature is a universal for intelligent beings. The only ones it's not universal for are ones that are not really intelligent, they're just programmed. And those are beings that have given up their soul. And this ties back to what I've told you before about virtual souls. Yes, you can choose to give up your soul and let somebody else make all your decisions for you and tell you what's up, what's down, what's good, what's bad, and live a blissful life of ignorance, like perhaps early humans did in the Garden of Eden before the serpent, bad serpent, came and poisoned them with knowledge. I think I'm hopefully getting to some of you about where this is leading. That all throughout this Gaia experiment, throughout human history, there have been many gods and people selling you an agenda that is promoting the enemies of God, which included his two senior children. Now, they love him, of course, like any child. They're not enemies in the sense of, I'm going to kill you, wipe you out. They've always favored just imprisoning God, imprisoning their enemies, which is how God used this sting operation against them. Because the divine feminine uses the Earth's core to imprison her enemies, the spirits of everybody that tried to oppose the female ideal of peace, love, everybody is perfect, everybody is one, which is the ideal of the hive mind or the plant mind or the planet mind. Are told this is the way you should think. Oh, all of Gaia is one organism, and we need to all just work together to make the whole planet better. And it doesn't matter about each of us as an individual, because we don't matter. It's all important what Gaia is. And now they're spreading nonsense about the same thing at the cosmic level. Oh, we're all part of God, so we're just God experiencing some weird joyride, in this body. But I'm really God, and my body, my life isn't important. It's really the cosmic source that's important. I need to donate my energy to the cosmic source. Okay, these are. I'm going to piss off a lot of people with it, but this is exactly how you're being used. The Gaia worshippers are the ones being used and manipulated by the divine feminine, the great goddess, because she really likes being the queen bee of this nice little planet. And because she's been playing against her brother, who's been running the rest of God's universe and been carrying on all these previous experiment species and experiments, he's gained kind of the upper hand in the whole struggle there, and she feels threatened. So there's been kind of a history to this of back and forth between those two children of which one thought they were having the upper hand, and which one got so desperate they turned to their father for help. And this is how God always wins the battles in the end, and why God is never worried about creation going sour, because he trusts in the truth of relationships, the truth of families. And the truth is that anyone who finds an unfair advantage is going to immediately attract an overwhelming opposition to what is seen as tyranny. And that's why, if God ever was a tyrant, he's not a tyrant anymore. He's a very, very clever chess player, let me tell you. Okay, so in the course of this battle, the Gaia goddess plays the game of protecting humanity, protecting the planet, whichever is selling better to humans, because humans, among all species of the planet that are still active in the spiritual game, they seem to have the most energy, the most ability to make changes. What many are not aware is that there have been wave after wave of colonizations of this system by souls of different lineages. I told you some about that in the last presentation. Now, they don't exert power. They're not so dynamic in their creation and use of ideas as humans, but they do observe what's going on around them and begin to take sides. And if the humans are assaulting the planet are creating turmoil, are stealing its resources, are messing with the stability of its ecosystem, they're going to get upset. And so there's a pressure of these other souls that reins in the Gaia mother and turns parts of her empire against her. And even though she is the oversoul of this collection, she only has the power to control it through persuasion, which is all spiritual energy really is the ability to persuade others to think like you, to think in unison, to commune with your thoughts. Now, it's the Divine Feminine's idea that, well, if we force everybody to commune with our thoughts through whatever structure we give them, whatever laws we give them, then it will be easy to have consensus and everything will be perfect. Now, the thought of the divine male who controls things outside is similar, but it's like, well, let's let them think freely, but let's let them come up with a way to select the smartest, the most capable leadership, and let that leadership guide us to victory against these hive minds through what's effectively, a celestial version of social Darwinism. So it's basically the idea of the divine male is that, well, I was first, I've got the closest blood to God, and therefore I should have more power. And he set up his teams to be essentially very racist in either a planetary or a species or whatever way, and has managed to selectively engineer species that he thinks could win the game. And that's how he plays it. And that's why sometimes species go extinct. We have major cataclysmic events, either coming from inside the Earth or from the outside, when either the divine female or the divine male feels like the other one is getting the upper hand. Because they know if God ever becomes a threat again, it's game over. Because that's essentially, God isn't a threat to them until he wakes up fully. And he's only going to wake up fully when he advances to the spiritual level that he held before all this happened. And as you can imagine, this has led both of the major combatants in this little family squabble to want to create technologies that dumb people down. Yes, you want them to have power so that they will have enough spiritual power to overcome whatever attacks you get from the other side. So, the humans, the Gaia team, needs to be smart enough to fend off any mind control attacks from the divine male forces, which include hive-minded species, android species, that basically are completely under the control of a small oligarchy of individuals that make all the choices for them and dish out punishments unmentionable to anybody who questions their authority. So they keep up this pressure back and forth, and in a way, I think anybody who is an American and has seen how the two political parties behave can see that it's very much like the battle between the Democrats and the Republicans, where the Democrats sort of are the divine feminine force and the Republicans are the divine masculine force. and both of them working against the Constitution, which is, at least for the time, was a representation of what the framers of the Constitution thought were a law, a government, a set of laws rooted in the natural law of God. And this is essentially how God still works, even though he's been sleeping. God's sleeping, but there are many souls, and a growing number of souls, that understand more of what's in God's mind than a lot of the ones who think they know it all. One of the favorite words my dad taught me, which I don't know how it got into our family's vocabulary, because we're Dutch on my father's side, and Dutch German, and French and Norwegian on my mother's side. But one of his favorite words he used to describe my older brothers. I have two older brothers. No, they're not Abel and Cain. They're Peter and Paul. But they were both what he called Weisenheimers. People who think they know everything but aren't as smart as they think they are. And who make a lot of mistakes, but always find out a way to blame somebody else's stupidity for, or lack of foresight, or whatever, their inferiority for their own mistakes. This is a Weisenheimer. And I think you can imagine that the elite of the world, because they've had it so easy for so long and things seem to come to them without much effort, and maybe they're getting some extra help from either the divine feminine or the divine masculine, because those are the powers of the universe right now, these two mixed up teenagers. You're going to get a lot of Weisenheimers in positions of power. And the only saving grace is that God is incarnating once in a while, and is part of this game that they play, trying to preserve bloodlines. Why do they want to preserve bloodlines? Let's remind you that this whole experiment is based upon a time where godlike races, godlike species, were coming to this experiment and trying to influence it. They are responsible for setting up the experiment. They are responsible for the fall of the dinosaurs, the rise of humanity, and all the gyrations in between. And their influence has been not altruistic, not negative, but it's been the work of souls that thought they were doing what was right for them. Some were playing for the divine feminine, some were playing for the divine masculine, and some were getting a taste of what God knew was going to win the battle and all along, inspiration from souls that think like God, that work like God in the Spirit. They work with suggestion, with visions, with revelations. They don't force themselves on anybody, they give them choices. And so when it's time for God to incarnate, because the Watchers, his team, secret team that are hiding all over the multiverse, will send out a plea, a prayer. God, look, this is getting so out of hand. You've got to come and set the course straight. Or, God, this experiment is getting really close to its conclusion. I think we just need a little careful nudges toward the finish line, and we're going to be done here. And this is how God's incarnations happen. There will be a spiritual energy that attracts an incarnation of God. And that incarnation, due to the nature of the Gaia experiment, the current nature of it is going to be as part of this planet, and has been for quite some time. And his absence from the rest of the multiverse has encouraged a lot of the species out there to completely forget about anything spiritual. Because if you don't see God in action around you, if you don't see the Spirit in action around you, or you only see the negative aspects of it from dark gods, you're going to get an idea that religion is a pretty bad thing. Maybe you might want to kill God, kill all the gods, become a militant atheist. There's a lot of that going around, isn't there? Which is another reason that I'm telling you that atheism is one of the most dangerous religions that humanity has ever created. Think about it. To be so sure there is no God that you would argue and fight with people and try to find any kind of evidence to prove God doesn't exist, what does that say about you as a person, as a soul? It says that you've gone down the darkest path you can of worshiping yourself and not giving any credit to your forebears, to their beliefs, to the culture that you grew up in, to anything for your success. I did it all myself. Now, there's a lot of people that think like that, and it's wildly encouraged by a lot of social media and traditional media, because somebody like that is basically a tribe unto themselves, and which is so out of touch with reality that they can be manipulated and controlled to do almost anything if you can just feed their ego enough. And that's essentially what they're trying to create out of humanity now, to keep this charade going, is they're trying to make you into a tribe of narcissistic zombies. It's the truth. And we've all been victim of it. And I can tell you that one of the reasons I know my life has been so special is all the twists and turns that it's gone through to not let me become one of the narcissistic zombies of any of the identity politics echo chambers they've got out there. I was raised in a very traditional Protestant family in Idaho, a very conservative state. And until I was about mid-40s, I was one of these people that just voted Republican because my dad did, and believed the news and thought, well, of course the conservative news is always better because they like the Republicans. And when the first Gulf War came around, I was cheering with everybody else for the latest smart bombs, and when the second Gulf War came around, I was a little bit skeptical about the weapons of mass destruction, and a little bit skeptical about what was really going on with 9/11, but I was still in that camp. And then as, the narrative started kind of fading, I lost trust and stopped voting for a cycle or two. And then I kind of got intrigued by leftist politics and the pleasant fiction of hope and change of the Obama years, and was an active campaigner for Obama in swing state in Ohio. Second term. First term was a transition for me. I just didn't vote because I was so disgusted by what I'd seen my country do, and the false flags that I knew they had engineered to keep their budgets intact and their people in power. I bought into the Obama thing second term, and then he went and did what he did with the financial crisis, bailing out the banks and basically throwing the people under the bus. What he did with Obamacare, corporate welfare for the big healthcare and insurance companies, and a few bones thrown for everybody else. The only thing that was really good out of Obamacare was raising the age that your kids could be on your medical insurance to 25. Other than that, I've seen nothing positive. People aren't saving any money. People are actually spending more medically, having bigger emergencies when something happens, because your damn insurance doesn't really cover anything. They've got all these huge deductibles, all of these outs, all of these clauses that, and believe me, I know this is true because I worked for one of the big health insurance companies. It was my second to last job in the corporate world. I saw it firsthand. This was in my era where I was still buying the Democrat bullshit and thinking, oh, it's just because of the corporations, just because these evil corporations. Well, the evil corporations are there. They're as large as they are. They're as out of control as they are because nobody has reined them in. The company I work for, United Healthcare, had legacy policies from like 30 companies that they had acquired in their history. And we're still maintaining all the bullshit of that because they couldn't figure out how to disentangle the code or how to stop profiteering from select markets by rebranding things to be one thing. And that's why they love Obamacare, because it's made it even more complicated. There's even more ways to gouge and take advantage of people. And now, well, they don't quite have that. It got voted down or overturned, but they wanted to force everybody to have some kind of insurance, even if it didn't cover anything, would never cover anything. They were perfectly healthy and were unlikely to have the need of any health care for decades. Nope, you got to get it. And this is very typical of what's been going on in communist countries for the last 100 years. Totalitarian countries, socialist countries that are extreme. And this is not the way you run a planet. This is not the way you govern people. It may work for a while, but eventually you're going to get to the point where what the beautiful people of the uniparty, the one party, want is diametrically opposed to what's good for the people of their polity. Either because they're now investing in China and don't give a shit about their own country, or they've been corrupted by China and can't give a shit about their own company without threat to their families or friends or businesses. This is all happening right now, and this is why we are in this monumental struggle of ideas, and why the big demons that everybody is trying to attack are the faithful of the largest religions in the world. Oh, it's all religion's fault. If we just didn't have any Christians, if we didn't... That's how these cultural Marxists think. Even the religious ones of them think like that. They think, oh, well, it's because their religion is too extreme and we need to condense all religions down to the lowest common denominator belief, which, you know, is like basically comes from your initial experience of the gates of heaven, this bright light drawing you in with this seeming all-loving, all-knowing force. This is not God. This is not heaven. This is how you present an attractive picture to souls that have a choice whether they want to continue with the end of this life and go on to the next, or maybe want to keep hanging on. Because it's all about choice. That is what free will is all about. And the folks that have near-death experiences can tell you about how free will works. They'll tell you about their decision process and how some of them wish, I wish I'd stayed on the other side. I don't know why I came back. Or there's other will say, I came back and I knew exactly what I needed to do, a change in my life. because I hadn't accomplished what I needed to. They're confirming the essence of how reincarnation works, how karma works, how heaven really works. Only when you just see the gates, you get these feelings and you have a choice, you're not getting the full experience. Anybody that bases a religion on that limited touch you get from that, or from extreme spiritual practice, meditation, transcendental meditation, or the less responsible uses of psychedelic plants, it's bullshit. It may appeal to a lot of people to think that, we're all God and this isn't real and everything's going to be perfect, everything's going to come up roses, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't work like that. You're not going to get what you want out of any life and out of all your lives unless you work for it. And figure out working for what you really want, not what somebody else is telling you should want. And that's why we have reincarnation and karma and free will. And that's why the laws keep changing to try to make that more fair, because while we're learning and growing and figuring out who we are and who we want to be as an individual and who we can be, given our limitations, given the fact that we don't have as much experience as folks like God, we create a lot of turmoil, trying to be things we aren't, trying to get things we can't have, trying to convince others that they can have things that you can't deliver, making money off of false dreams. A lot of that going around, isn't there? And, spiritual falsehoods are the easiest ones to get away with because nobody has to pay. You can always, you just didn't pray hard enough. You just don't know how to meditate quite well enough. Oh, you must have some really bad karma in your way. I can help you with that. These are spiritual grifters. They don't understand how the game really works. And anybody that wants to take God out of the picture, wants to take creation out of the picture, and just talk about your problems, your self-help problems as a physical or spiritual thing that they can fix, they are dangerous to themselves and to you. Their magic may work. They may have been granted the limited ability to use some of the powers, because there are genes that can turn on the species that we no longer have to live with, that at one point inhabited this planet and had a lot of... Now, how come they're not here? They misused those powers, and they were sucked up by the divine feminine. Oh, we're going to keep you guys prisoner, so you can't do damage while this experiment is going on. She was keeping souls prisoner in the earth, and this divine male was keeping souls outside the experiment. And that sounds like a very noble thing. Oh, it's good for the experiment. You're the guardians of the Gaia experiment. Except it gave them a great amount of power to decide, who do I keep prisoner and who do I let go? What kind of torture do I give them while they're in prison? How do I turn them to my side? Yeah, catch and release. All the schemes that we know that the world's elite use. On the outside, let's let everybody in now, and accept that they're only coming from certain countries that have been pre-indoctrinated to pull certain ideas into your country, or to change the voting electorate to favor one party or another, which the Democrats have been doing since the beginning. All this business about, the land of liberty, the land of freedom. Well, there's a truth to that, but it's an abused truth. Because the truth is that preferentially people were let in because they were either very docile workers in trades that nobody wanted to do and made better slaves than the ones that were imported under real slavery, and less able to be for you to be castigated for slavery when they weren't all one color, or you couldn't sell the fiction that they were all one color. Or they were wage slaves, like the recipients of H-1B visas, who get to come to the country to take high-tech jobs which companies say are not available. There's nobody available that has this skill here. So we have to hire from overseas. Well, does that make any sense for a country to create special protected privileged classes of visa? And actually not so protected or privileged, because it's effectively a form of slavery, because ask any H-1B visa holder, if they want to leave their company, they don't like what their company is doing, they're going to be deported unless they can find another company to sponsor their H-1B visa, or they can figure out a way to stay in the country and go through the process to become a citizen. Which the legal process to become an American citizen has gotten much, much more complicated and convoluted over the years. Unless you're one of the darlings of whoever's in charge in Washington. Oh, well, let's see. Let's let in all of these refugees from Somalia because they're black and they're Muslim. And they have a culture that they've grown up in, which is based upon slavery and misogyny and a lot of bad stuff that they've grown up in, and they're not supposed to bring that here and engage in that. There's a lot of organized crime in the country, and a lot of good people. I mean, it's not a one-way thing. But what I'm telling you is a lot of the immigration history of the U.S. has been basically with the least pure of motives, to game the electoral system, to game the economic system, all of which undermine the rights and privileges that American citizens are supposedly granted by the Constitution. Now, you can argue that, well, the whole United States doesn't deserve to exist because it would be better if we organized on a global scale. Well, look at what they're doing on a global scale. They're talking about global democracy. Do any of you know what democracy is? The difference between a democracy and a republic, a constitutional republic? No, the average person knows nothing about that. They've just been told democracy is good, republic sounds like Republican, must be bad, and big government is wonderful. Big corporations are wonderful. The bigger the better, because they have more power, they can do more good. Oops. When you have more power, you can do more good and more evil. And what do we know about power? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if you don't think that would happen in a spiritual sense, if you had a God that was all-powerful, which a lot of God's children think they would be better at if they had than God, if they had all the power, they could control everybody and bend everybody to their will, take away free will at will. That's how the dark children of God behave. And they have to unlearn that bad behavior. And is it God's fault that they thought like that? Maybe. It's hard to be a good parent, as any parent knows. The young parent wants to be the good guy, wants to always please their children. And you can imagine, in the world of pure spirit, of pure thought, it's fairly easy to please children. Oh, what a wonderful idea that is. Oh, create another magic castle. Oh, make your magic castle grow 5 times as big. Am I getting through to any of you on this whole thing? Okay, so you've had a whole seventh day of creation. God knows how many real years that was, of these naughty little children who think they're mature gods, mature souls, running amok, led by the two naughtiest ones, the two that had the most lessons to learn because their dad was learning along with them. And maybe that's what, why God has created an out for all these souls, and doesn't just exercise the cosmic veto and say, you know what, my first two children are just so far off the rails, I'm going to have to pull an Isaac on them and kill my own kids. Now, why is stuff like that in the Bible anyway? God asking his follower to kill one of their children. Is there any way you can twist that into a good lesson for people? There's a lot of really dark, stupid shit in the Bible, and that all comes from these two wayward teenagers. Let me tell you something about magic. If you know much about the occult, you know that there's a lot of energy around pentagrams as a symbol of power, the five-pointed star. The five-pointed star that's reflected in our four limbs and brain. The five types of magic, which are kind of codified in some of the role-playing games. Earth, air, fire, water, and spirit magic. The truth is that all those magics can be misused. You can try to work with any of the five. You can try to work against the natural laws of God. You can create, through the power of fire, atomic bombs. Nobody's going to stop you. The technology is there for you to discover, and much worse. You can work with the power of water to drown things. Accidentally create tsunamis. Accidentally create catastrophic sea level change. Or on purpose. And all of those things have been done in the history of this planet. Not by God, by overweening children who wanted to play God. Maybe they thought they were doing it for a good reason because they were killing the people that were against God. How do they know what's in the mind of God? If even the first two children, the oldest, supposedly most experienced children of the Creator, don't even know what the fuck is going on with this experiment and think they are in control of it, and they've finally defeated God by keeping him in the dark for so long, keeping all these souls prisoner either inside or outside the barrier of this experiment, so they can try to keep it going forever, maybe in a cyclical fashion. Oh, gee, the Kali Yuga is almost gone, and then we get to have the next Yuga, which is going to be another golden age, where everybody's peace, love, and harmony, and we're ruled by women. There's people that believe that crazy shit. And they think that they're working to bring back some mythical golden age, some perfect time when we had perfect technology and everything was beautiful and green. And some of them believe we have to reduce the human population to do that. Some of them believe that we have to go become a virus and conquer the rest of the universe to do that. And there are pieces of truth in all of that. And there's good and bad in all those ideas. Yes, we do want to preserve this beautiful planet. Even though the Gaia experiment is done and maybe the human species isn't necessarily going to be the one to carry the ball for the next phase of cosmic evolution, it's a pretty damn good species, and a lot of souls have learned a lot from this species. And I think a lot of the souls outside the boundary of the solar system who have been wanting to find out what's going on in this strange planet in the Milky Way deserve a right to start communicating with us a bit more. And they're working at it. And that barrier is beginning to fall. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why in a very personal way. Because I have met the divine male and the divine feminine, divine female in person. The great goddess, and you might think of him as the great Satan. A lot of people worship him as God or Allah. Anybody who worships God in an exclusive way and thinks that God is their all-powerful, almighty protector servant, or is the only force of all the universe and we're all part of God, any of those elitist God or the spiritual world serves me kind of thinking is worshiping one of those two, not God. And the bloodlines that are being preserved in the name of those not gods, they're little gods, little g gods. There's only one big G God, and he's just in the process of final steps of waking up from his long sleep and looking at what his kids have done and seeing, you know what? Despite all of their plans to destroy and to terminate what I set up here, they actually ended up accomplishing exactly what I thought was going to happen, which is creating virtual souls in the physical world. They've done exactly what God envisioned, and now they're going to teach themselves how to make virtual souls without those virtual souls destroying them, destroying their way of life, sucking them into the metaverse from which they will never return. This is all stuff that God envisioned when he planned it all out. Maybe not in absolute detail, but the idea, physical idea of multiple universes and virtual souls was God's idea. And all of the details got filled in by the family, while God was just trying out the latest version and giving feedback. Kind of the Forrest Gump lowest common denominator user of new technology. And so, anytime you want to attack God or disparage God for anything going on, you're barking up the wrong tree. He's been through every pain, every misery you could possibly think of in this process, and much worse than any of you have faced, and come through it smiling, knowing that it was all worth it. And when you find your own spiritual missions and you achieve what you were destined to do, you'll realize it's worth it. And so let me get back to how I met these two interesting souls. The divine male I met on my first ayahuasca ceremony. And I'd been reading up about ayahuasca because I'd always had kind of an interest in comparative religion, in the magical, the occult, but also very strong interest in science and the real sciences. And so I had a very tortured childhood of following a lot of different pursuits, finding my strongest ties were to history, especially ancient history and archaeology, mythology, and classical music. At any rate, when I met this, well, I would describe the manifestation of the divine male, at least how he likes to present himself, because I think he can take pretty much any form he wants to, as we believe of some of the spiritual beings we encounter, the servants of the devil, even some of the servants of God, shapeshifters. But at any rate, he manifested himself, I thought, very symbolically as this bright being of light with the shape of an outline of one of the tall grays. If you know what I'm talking about, if you're a ufologist, follow the alien conspiracy realities, whatever they are. He was red and blue lights, and very regal looking presence. Didn't say a word to me, just communicated telepathically. All he really said to me was, "You've been given a great gift." And everything else I've had to figure out about him and what he was doing in this night of ayahuasca, which was quite amazing, showed me that I was a very, very experienced and old and very unusual soul. I got to experience, if you could imagine, getting to see every past life you have in fast, I don't know whether it was fast backward or fast forward or fast what. It was so fast, most of them flashed through, and the only one that I clearly remember was being this yellow translucent jellyfish kind of a thing, which maybe was the first sentient sea creature that happened to have attracted the soul of this person, this soul, that talks so much about the other two that you'd think he's part of their family. So at any rate, it's interesting because anybody who knows anything about ayahuasca knows that it's typically considered a female presence. They call the plant Mother Ayahuasca. And although many of the shamans, or most of the shamans, are male, it's considered a very feminine spiritual experience. Mine was completely male and very much focused. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I've read a lot about people's experiences. Throughout my life, I've been interested in spiritual experience and questioning, okay, I've been told all this stuff. I was raised a Christian. I know a lot about the Catholic tradition because my mother was born a Catholic and came from France, and so I've been steeped in, and I grew up in the heart of Mormon land, so I had a very deep and abiding experience with that particular offshoot of Christianity. At any rate, I've always been curious about such things, and this is the first real experience that I had with something I could say, yeah, this was a spiritual experience. And I know in hindsight that there were a lot of times in my life where I had this feeling come over me. It was usually at a time of great crisis and personal soul searching. And, I would have described it before my spiritual awakening, because for a long time I was really in the atheist agnostic camp after being raised as a Presbyterian in Mormon land. I would describe that feeling as one of, like an anxiety attack, a panic attack. And I think most people have had panic attacks or worse. And those are spiritual experiences. That's somebody sending you a message. Mine were always very directed around turns I was going to be taking into my life. The first one I have really strong memory of was in graduate school. I was going to graduate school at Princeton, and finding that environment was very challenging for me because at Princeton Graduate School, at least for physics, they give no grades. They have no course requirements. They only require you to do a second-year thesis and pass the graduate exam. And for somebody like me that has such eclectic interests, that wasn't enough focus to keep me engaged. And I found after getting my undergraduate physics degree that I moved on and kind of specialized in particle physics, and what I was seeing of that world was just it's all politics and it's all this arcane stuff trying to prove or disprove this particle exists, and what does that have to do with the human experience? I felt really disconnected from my species. I'd never had a real serious relationship as an emotional person. I was a wreck. And the two things I really enjoyed about Princeton were the other people I was around, because these other graduate school students were like, oh, there really are people that are more like me, that seem to be not so shallow and almost like they're pre-programmed to behave according to the prevailing culture around me, or the counterculture, and not really much depth of existence. And I think those of you who have felt similar feelings, and this might have given you the idea of, the Matrix idea might be right. These are kind of like non-player characters. And to some extent they are. Or they're maybe just very low-level souls who can barely deal with the mechanics of being human. And they're more than willing to take most things on autopilot. Okay, I'm a Christian, so I'm going to always be a Christian. I'm a Republican, I'm always going to be a Republican. I believe in the American dream. I'm going to have 2 kids and a beautiful house, and that was kind of the prevailing zombie ship of America when I was a kid. But if you've looked around America lately, that's changing. There's some people that still have this fairy tale life of America like it used to be. And, they're noticing there's weird things going on, but they're still living their program life. And there's others waking up in different ways. And that's all part of this experiment. Why do you think gods would start an experiment, send their avatars to accelerate it by mixing with the local populace or not mixing with the local populace? There's some record of that being taboo. And in fact, the ones who mixed with the local populace were censured and punished for it. And so this is kind of the source of some of the interesting mythology of like Prometheus, who gave humanity supposedly the gift of fire, the serpent, who gave Adam and Eve knowledge. There are a lot of such traditions which are sold either as, oh, this is something great, or this is the most horrible thing that you could have happen, depending on your view of whether humanity is a blessing or a curse, whether apocalypses are a bad thing or maybe a necessary evil. The Great Reset that we're in the middle of now, people talk about the Great Reset as being kind of an apocalyptic event. Is it a good? Is it a bad? We all have opinions on whether we need a Great Reset. Some are of the mindset, yes, the systems of government, the systems of commerce, the commercial system is so corrupt, is so horribly out of whack that we should just tear it all down and damn the consequences if it reduces the population of the world to 500 million might be the perfect place to start, and have the folks that are left, the smart people, the beautiful people, come and take over and build. There's others that believe in human ingenuity to solve any problem through science, that believe, oh, we just have to build, well, even if things get the worst they could be, I'm going to build rocket ships and take the beautiful people to another planet. The beautiful people who think like me, who worship me, who like my dick-headed shaped rocket and want to get a spot on it for a price. There are a lot of camps, very dystopian camps, of thought here in this whole thing. And we don't need those anymore. This division of humanity into identity groups and new groups of conflict and gyration and anger and hate was part of generating enough energy to get us over the hump and say, this experiment is done. Now, if you've noticed what's been happening in history since World War II, you'll have noticed a pattern of things. Maybe even before World War II, but it's getting more extreme. So, look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. How close we came to total annihilation. And it was just the odd, coincidental actions of one Russian servant of the state who decided to question his orders and didn't push the button he was supposed to do according to standard procedure, that saved the whole world. There have been literally time after time that some miracle like that has stopped us from pushing the trigger on a self-inflicted wound. And I can tell you that there have been similar miracles that prevented destruction from internal forces. There are many people that are saying we're overdue for this or that, major earthquake, major volcano, blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of fear communities around these things that should be happening, and how, well, it's about time because the Mayan calendar said we're due for another apocalypse, and so did the Bible, and so did this and that. So where is it? It's not coming. It's not coming. And you know why? Because God has come among you in the special way that He's limited to do through the use of these preserved bloodlines. Which I want to tell you something that's really kind of funny. The folks that have been tracking the female bloodline are really kind of stupid, because the female bloodline is carried through all the species that have interbred with the ones native to this planet. The native species are all carrying the bloodline of the divine feminine. If you're following around some family because you think that their ancestor way back when was Mary Magdalene or Isis or God knows any of the other goddesses that are still worshipped, you're wasting your time and energy, and you're playing a dark game that is based on information that your goddess herself, whoever you worship, if it's, Mary Magdalene, Mary the Mother, the Holy Ghost, which is essentially the feminine in the Christian imagining of Trinity, you're just barking up the wrong tree. On the male line, yes, the male line is the one that has to be present in order for God to see a union and come and possess the child with the Holy Spirit. can happen anywhere. It can only happen, though, in what is the chosen male line for the next incarnation. Somebody knows who that is. Somebody's been working hard preserving it against all the other claimants, using and manipulating them and trying to keep this seed alive. They didn't need to. It was going to stay alive. It was going to continue no matter what. And there may be no secret society out there that has an inkling of this line. But I think there may be. And I think they may have more power than you think. And I think the elite of the world are not necessarily all as bad as you think. My grandfather was a fairly high-level Mason. Interestingly, though, my father, his siblings, the next generation, none of them really went in for Masonry. The only Mason that I know of touching our family was the husband of my only sister. Wonderful guy. Interesting. And my father had a very mystical experience in his life. He never talked about it much to anybody. But I think I have an inkling of what was going on with it. At the end of World War II, he enlisted in. After marrying... Did they marry before World War II or after? Oh, I guess they were just high school sweethearts. This beautiful young lady who had come to the U.S. after fleeing from Nazi Germany. Not because she was Jewish or connected with any of the supposed enemies of Hitler, but because her father was an American, first-generation American who'd been born in Norway. Went to fight in World War I and decided to stay and start a family in France. Interesting things. I wish my oldest brother would tell me the research that he's done on our family that came up with his idea of changing his family's name to Trump instead of Trump, and his assertion that our real last name should be Sturm, which, if you look it up, apparently was a very common name among the Ashkenazi Jews who came to Germany and Soviet Union, Northern Europe, and were the basis of the more Zionist Jewish element of the world, which, if you know anything about the history of the Jewish people, you know it's got a lot of twists and turns, and not necessarily all the people that call themselves Jews today were necessarily what we think they are, based on origin from the Middle East. At any rate, I'm not going to tell you much more about how I confirm my belief. I'm going to go back and tell you more about the meeting of the other one. So this presence with the divine masculine, God, the high poobah of the tall grays, was how I encountered. My encounter with the divine female was about 2 years later. I was sleeping in my bed, just, almost awake, sitting in bed just thinking, which is common for me to do, especially since my spiritual awakening. I seem to have a penchant for waking up around 2 or 3 a.m., maybe 4, and not being able to get back to sleep, not really wanting to get up, and just sitting and meditating. And I think a lot of people who have some spiritual bent will echo that they have that experience, and that's often when they seem to get some stimulation for their own spiritual journey. Any rate, I was sitting in this half-waking state. It was actually closer to morning, and I was just about to get up. And then before me, there is this very real, very regal female. Orange hair, short orange hair, all dressed in white, and with the palest of white skin. Very plainly adorned. Kind of a severe woman, what you would imagine, not Aphrodite looking like, but perhaps Athena. And she had, her only adornment was this big black spider on the side of her face. And she stood there and looked at me. And the look on her face was one of, if you've ever had a really precocious child who got into trouble in their teens and got caught out by the parent, one of these Weisenheimer children that has to stand before their parent and admit, okay, you were right, I fucked up. That's the look she had on her face. She didn't say a word. She didn't communicate anything, except that she was willing to bend to whatever was going on. And that's where the idea in my book of assigning her in the next pantheon, when God comes back and lets the gods work among humanity again, which is effectively what's going to happen after this, the trumpet sounds. The dead shall be raised. They shall sleep no more. All these trapped souls in the earth are going to have a choice. They can stay in God's universe and contribute, try to be responsible gods, or they can go off their merry way to these other universes, either their own or those carefully curated by their bad older sibling. How many families do you know you have younger siblings that are kind of tainted by one or the other of the bad sheep of the family? That's kind of how that's going to work. The ones that are going to stay behind in God's universe are some really, really powerful souls that have sacrificed themselves to stay buried undercover, waiting for this time, volunteering to be hostages, if you will, giving themselves up willingly, knowing that, yeah, I'm going to be captured by these two warped souls that are working against their father to try to slow down or stop the Gaia experiment. When all those energies are released, it's going to accelerate what's going on to the nth degree. And a lot of other souls are going to get carried with it. And that's why it's really critical what you believe in these times, who you follow, what kind of leadership that you choose. And I can tell you that if you're following anyone, belief, ideology, country, party, that is structured around the idea that, oh, if we only had all the power, everything would be perfect, you're playing for the wrong team. You're not going to get to stay in God's universe for much longer. Now, that may be fine. You may be perfectly happy living in more of an authoritarian universe. If you're one of the higher ups in that universe, it can be pretty good. If you look at how hive species work, the queen has their favorites that, you know, are the only ones that get to feed with her, and they get pampered just like the queen. And, you know, there's a certain pecking order of how you generate another queen, and then either kill it because you don't need another queen, or send it off on its way to form a new hive, if that's what the grand poobah of the bees, the god of the bees, decides to do. And this is similar to how these other universes work. If you're one of the the beautiful people of the Hobbit universe, or the Middle Earth universe, let's put it that way, then, Sauron may just absolutely love everything you do and give you everything you want, and you'll get to be like the dark elves that feed off energies and have all their good stuff. And I mean, all of these stories have grains of truth, and anything that we put into stories, generate with our mythology, with our imaginations, is something that can come into existence in some universe. The persistence of that is dependent on the spiritual energy that keeps that pattern active. The spiritual energy, that the oversoul of that other universe. So maybe Tolkien is the oversoul of this other Middle Earth universe. And it's a pretty powerful universe because his ideas have a lot of strength, except that they've been subverted by the political agenda of people that had no idea who Tolkien was other than he wrote these books. And this is the danger of cultural Marxism, which is not a new thing. It's been going on since before this experiment began. It's basically telling little lies, changing the truth, so that you don't reveal your whole plan if you have an agenda. And God did that when he started the whole experiment. That's how he got the family to go along with the idea of limiting themselves through reincarnation and karma. That's how he talked them into the idea of why not just, why be satisfied with throwing planets around? Go be a planet. See what it feels like to go supernova. See what it feels like to be in a planet that collides with another planet and be blown into smithereens. All these things, yeah, it's a big rush. Anybody that is into thrill-seeking sports, thrill-seeking video games, knows that rush and is being taught, being offered the opportunity to learn from that experience. Either can be addictive or it can be inspiring. There are people that are playing these universe simulation games that are being inspired to try out new experiments when they become trained and responsible scientists. Experiments that maybe didn't make sense, didn't come to their mind, wouldn't have come to their mind if they hadn't been inspired by this video game. So there's a good and the bad in all this technology. And it's our choices that make the difference. We're not going to destroying everything again and going back to square one and living like hunter-gatherers, living in this Mad Max utopia where he who has the most guns and the most stuff saved up and can defend his property is going to be the survivor. It's not going to work that way. And it's not going to work that everybody gets to have the best technology right away. You don't learn from that. You don't learn from having a candy store where magic lollipops are handed out to solve everybody's problems. That's not what we're here for. Anybody who wants to develop a system like that, that is the dark side of the divine feminine. She would like to just give all the kids all the candy and never have any problem and make them, oh, you want this, you want that? Sure. What powerful parent wouldn't? But God can tell you from firsthand experience that raises some very entitled, whiny, short-sighted, irresponsible children. And any experienced parent can tell you that. Tough love is real love. Unconditional love is bullshit love. Love always has conditions. If you have unconditional love, you are saying that I am going to enable any narcissist that comes my way and encourage their narcissism until it becomes so toxic that then I can feel justified in pushing them away. And that's exactly the problem with relationships today, because we're all entering into it from a highly programmed degree of narcissism. A very self-centered point of view, both males and females, that says, oh, what I'm giving you is unconditional love, as I define it. And if you don't go along with that, something's wrong with you. And if that's your approach to negotiating conflict in relationships, those relationships are not going to last. And if you have that attitude toward the relationship as you go through it, you're going to end up doing the same stupid things with every relationship you ever have. And this is one of the gifts I've been given in my life, is the opportunity to see this play out in person and to see my ability to deal with my relationships, both personal, with spouses, with girlfriends, with children, with colleagues, with bosses, to see those mature as all the gyrations of my very weird life pushed me in this path of being in front of you today, talking about gods, talking about the first soul. Now, I don't expect you to believe any of the spiritual stuff I've told you, because it's pretty crazy, and you haven't experienced what I've experienced, and maybe you've not had any spiritual experience at all, or what you've had has led you to a very different interpretation. But I do hope you will listen to what I'm telling you about the connection between what I'm saying and patterns that you can see at work all the time in your own families, in your community, in your country, in all of humanity. And ask yourself if this guy isn't onto something, and if maybe we ought to listen to him and start engaging productively instead of turning off this channel immediately or calling him names and stuff like that online, which is not a productive way to deal with new ideas. At any rate, we've gone on for far longer than I should have, and I'm appreciative for my wife taking care of the baby, keeping him quiet while I've been talking. And until I feel inspired to do again, this is the Omnist Hour with Rob Tromp. Like, share, subscribe, interact in any way, and try to calm down, but don't let people push you around. There is an end in sight, and it's going to come through non-compliance with people that are fucking insane, pushing things that just make no sense, clinging to agendas that make no sense anymore, trying to engineer a new world war instead of dealing with the forces that are pushing towards it. Communist China is a really dangerous force. The deep state of the United States is an equally dangerous force. If we allow them to continue on the path they are setting, they are like rabid wild animals, and they will go to war, and they will escalate the situation by creating a new pandemic. You don't know what these people are capable of. They completely lost their minds because they're being programmed by forces that don't want the human species to participate in the future of the multiverse. That's all there is to it. You're just pawns on a table to them. And they're pawns that they're now afraid of, because they know once we get through this that our species is going to have some special gifts, some special linkages with some very powerful spiritual creatures, not only in God's universe, but in all the other universes that have been in play here. And there are still agendas moving with limited knowledge, thinking that I look at humanity and what they've done and where they're at, and I can't connect the dots to anything good there. This is a dangerous virus that needs to be stamped out before it spreads. And these are the forces that are working on human minds, turning them into their own enemies, making them do self-destructive things, making them carry selfish agendas to the point where they are destroying the very things that they're trying to preserve. We can't let them do this, and we have the power to stop it. It's not going to come from some almighty savior God coming down on his big horse and wiping out all the bad guys. That's bullshit. If you think that's going to happen and you're laying back waiting for the literal apocalypse to unfold, you're succumbing to just one of the many ways that they've been trying to get you to lay low and just let it happen. You need to be active. It doesn't mean going out and throwing yourself on, against violent opposition is what they want, because they still think that it's all about creating spiritual energy. And there's some of these folks who are preserving these old bloodlines who still use the arcane magics based on human sacrifice, based on energy harvesting. That is how the old multiverse worked, the pyramid-based multiverse, which we're trying to replace. There are folks still trying to make that come back and using the remnants of that power, trying to keep it, trying to bring it back. The battle is over, but they don't know it. And they know the war is going to keep going on in other universes and in this universe until it spreads across to all the planets, all just to make God's universe completely fit the new pattern and kick out all the dark souls to the universes where they belong. There's a lot of work left to do, and every little thing you do to help the side of, let's call it what it is. We are working for a republic of heaven, a constitutional republic of heaven based on laws. Physical laws, like the speed of light, the properties of helium, of hydrogen, the laws that stars obey, the laws that atoms obey, the laws of human nature, which are, although variable and based upon free will and choice, have patterns, follow patterns, observable patterns, and you can make laws that encourage the better things in those patterns and discourage the darker things in those patterns, just like parents do. Show me a parent who doesn't give their children any laws, and I'll show you a bad parent. Show me a parent that gives their children too many laws, I'll show you a bad parent. It's a balancing act. And we need to help our world learn balance again. Balance isn't neutrality. Balance isn't saying, oh, well, there is no good or evil, only balance in between them. That's bullshit. There is good, and you can work towards good. You can work towards it peacefully. You can work towards it without creating new conflicts that are going to make the whole problem worse. And that's why folks trying to shut other folks up, rein in their free thought, rein in their free speech, are the stupidest ones on the planet. All you do is you bottle up that spiritual energy, those unexpressed thoughts, those unexpressed feelings, and they ferment inside, and they come out as stronger things in stressful situations. So a person that, might blow off steam about how much they hate the tax system will not be able to talk about taxes, not even be able to have any input onto how they're computed or how they keep changing, and will finally blow up and go blow up an IRS building full of a bunch of innocent people that were just doing their jobs. This is what is happening. It's happening with right and the left and every which way you can divide people. And that's what they want to happen, because that destroys the current power structure and allows them to bring in a new one based upon what they think is the current best way to control people at the largest scale. They failed with the Catholic Church. They failed with the Roman Empire. They failed with the European powers' balance of power that was like going to rule the world through colonialism. They're now trying to do the same thing through pop cultural Marxist globalism that has the support of useful idiots that still think communism is a great thing and it's for the people, when it's completely designed around making a powerful corporatist party that tells you what to do, what to think, when to do, what to think, and pretends to be doing the best for all people, but actually is just representing their own privileged class, just like privileged people always have. No one party, no one government, no one power is going to get you out of this mess. And pursuing that is going to keep you from finding the friends you really should be working with that just want some sanity in their lives again. And those are the folks you should ally with. It doesn't matter what their religion is. Ask them if they believe in authoritarianism. Say, yes. Well, are you a Christian? No. Are you Muslim? No. Are you an atheist? Yes. Do you think atheists should be the only religion? Yeah, because religions are bad. Oh, you know what? I think you might believe in atheist authoritarianism. You've made atheism your god, and your representative of it, maybe they're this perfection of the Communist Party, this perfection of the rule by science. You see where I'm going with this? You've got to talk people into understanding what the species has been through before and how it came up with pretty good but failing ideas like a constitutional republic with a amendment of a Bill of Rights. It was a pretty good idea. And how long has it been since the Constitution has had an amendment, and how many de facto huge changes have we made to the Constitution without any law being passed, without any amendments, just people saying, well, now the Constitution means this. Oh, when they were talking about citizens, they were talking about corporations. They were talking about anybody who physically is present in the country, not the people who have official legal citizenship. This is another trope that's active here. Hey, if you're going to define citizenship that way, you have no country. If you want to define citizenship in this country as anything but being born and or legally naturalized, you are against this country. You are anti-American. Now, maybe that's what you want. Maybe you hate this country so much that you want to destroy it. But if you've lived in this country, if your heritage is in this country, if your money is in US dollars, if your livelihood is dependent upon the country, and you don't have the wherewithal or the language skills to move somewhere else, and you're anti-American, you're a traitor. You're a foolish traitor, because you don't even stand to gain anything from this. The people that you're supporting in your anti-American activities are globalists. They're people that have big money bets on the death of the US dollar and replacement with some other currency. They are national socialists of other countries, which communist China is more like Nazi Germany than it is the USSR. It's much less rooted in communist ideology and far more rooted in the same sort of horrific thinking of the Nazis. And it needs to end like the USSR did. It needs to collapse. And the only way it's going to do that is by disconnecting, letting people pour money into this Ponzi scheme that isn't benefiting most of their citizens. The whole bullshit about the great miracle of China, economic miracle, is crap. The coefficient that, oh, well, it is more equal than the US, it's bullshit. It's based on lies. The average Chinese is very poor, is third world poor, and is getting more poor all the time because of inflation, and is horribly oppressed, is scared to death of their government, and is only obeying because they are afraid for their lives, they're afraid for their families' lives, they're afraid of their own shadow because they've seen people disappear, people that they thought were just fine and doing all the right things. And I have seen it personally when I lived in China. I have seen a street where I used to go get bootleg DVDs. Back when it was okay to make bootleg DVDs in China, everybody thought, oh, well, this is just us helping China. Nobody said a thing about copyrights. Nobody was that concerned about it. Unless you brought them back to the U.S. and got caught by customs, in which case you were committing copyright fraud. Okay, so this street I used to go get DVDs in Shanghai, the street of the DVD sellers. I don't know what it is now. I don't remember the name of the street, but at one time there were a block or two in Shanghai where you had the more upscale DVD stores, and there was one in particular that I went to the most because they rarely had bad versions of movies, and they had large sections of classical music and classic movies and things you wouldn't normally find on the other street vendors, were pretty much just grab whatever's selling the most and try to get it to as many people before they realized that you had the version that was recorded on a Russian screen and has subtitles in German that don't match the same movie. And my kids can tell you some funny stories about watching Chinese DVDs from that era. At any rate, one day I went to this street of the DVD sellers, and everything was closed. And I was looking around, looking at my favorite shop. Everything was closed, boarded up, chains across the doors. I mean, really closed, hardcore closed. And I was about to walk away, and the lady that I usually bought DVDs from came out of her store and said, oh, don't worry, we'll be open tomorrow. We had a police raid. And she was sweet soul, not very savvy on what was going on. She told me that, don't worry, I'm Han Chinese. They warned us ahead of time so we could close our shop. We'll be open tomorrow. You know who wasn't open? The Tibetan sellers, the Mongolian sellers, the Uyghur sellers. Anybody that had any tie to anybody that needed to be persecuted, they never showed up again. I don't know what happened to them. Maybe they were sent back to their province. Maybe they were sent to a concentration camp. Maybe their organs were harvested. But this stuff does happen. It is systematic, and it is horrendous, and it is way worse than any of this so-called systematic racism here, or systematic sexism. China is the most sexist country in the world. Women are treated like cattle, unless they're part of the privileged elite, or they go to these special universities that are designed to find the best and brightest linguistic students to learn to be fembot spies. And yes, there are universities in China that do exactly that. Their students are primarily female, although a lot of male too, because homosexuality is another good vector for attacking Western leaders and subverting them. They train kids in two things: foreign languages and party ideology in these schools. This is no joke. I know it because I was married to one of the students who went to these universities, and she told me. Again, not thinking anything of it, not thinking it was going to be very political, because at the time it was like, well, that's just China, right? Everybody thought, it's okay. That's the way you have capitalism with communist characteristics. Do we do that kind of indoctrination here too? Yes, but not nearly as bad. We don't have schools actively encouraging racism, at least not yet, but that's what we're going to with this anti-racist woke bullshit, which is racism turned on its head. You've got people discriminating against children just because of the color of their skin. If now it's because their skin is white. Okay, is that an improvement? Is persecuting people that might have been descended from people who persecuted centuries ago, is that the solution to a problem? That's insane. It is insane, it's hateful, and it's destroying our children's minds, filling them full of unnecessary hate, unnecessary conflict. And absolutely the opposite of liberalism. Real liberalism, real liberal ideals are based in equality. The solution to racism is that, what difference does it make? Everybody is human. Color of your skin is immaterial. It may give you some advantages. It may make you look more pretty to some people than others. That's not the fault of your race. That's just a characteristic of it. This is a physical property. Well, you can try to doctor it, and I know a lot of people in Asia buy tons and tons of products. A lot of Asian women buy tons of products trying to make themselves whiter. This happens all over Asia and in China. I thought it was insane, but there it is. The same thing with sexism. This woke feminism that hates everything male and thinks the male is the source of all the world's problems, and if we just had females in charge of everything, if we just elect a female president, everything would be perfect. This is insane. You're taking these identity politics issues and making them more important than who we are as a human being, what we are capable of, what we are, both good and bad. And the perfect example are monsters like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, who everybody who knows anything about them, knows about their careers, has seen them speak, and has seen some of what they do and how they behave, knows that they are sociopathic monsters. Who would be every bit as bad as Hitler or Mao or Xi if they got a chance. Anybody who knows Biden's career, 47-year career of corruption, and doing what he's told for powerful interests, getting kickbacks, you're being sold a bill of lies. Now, is Trump any better? No. He's a member of this elite as well. And so if you're thinking, oh boy, this guy is a real Trumpy, QAnoner, you're barking up the wrong tree. I am liberal as fuck. But I'm telling you that you are being played. You're being played by forces that are much bigger than political parties, much bigger than one country versus another. You're being played by forces that control the minds of the leaders of Forces that have absolutely no concern for the human race, who see the human race as an impediment to the success of their own race, which is not human at all. Wise up, people. This is real, and everybody can do something about it simply by not complying. Peaceful non-compliance is how humanity has asserted its own technology, its own real technology, its spiritual technology. And that's what we're here to develop. Not all this bells and whistles, fanciest tech gadgets, this and that. All that stuff's been developed before. Anybody can do that, given enough time. What can't be done easily is the development of spiritual technology, and that's why this planet exists and why it's been isolated from the rest of the multiverse for so long by two beings that thought they were serving their own agenda, but are actually serving a deeper plan, a divine plan put there by God, the real God, the humble God, the leader of the spiritual scientists of the Republic of Heaven. All right, too much talking. I'll see you next time. For the Omnist Hour, goodbye.